All right, here we go. Welcome to another Finance Friday. I'm Jerry. I'm the owner and founder of a company called Wealth DynamX. And what we do every single week is we give out free financial education. Okay. And the reason why is it's something I honestly never had, right? So I grew up in a family that was, in poverty level income. If you know my story, I've been homeless, had, when I was 8 years old, all in the same summer. Parents got divorced. We lost our house, car got repoed, lived in a trailer, lived in a tent. This is all like my eighth or ninth year old summer. And so I had this thing with money where I was like, man, I hate this stuff. Like it's just ruin and pain and terrible. And I've never liked it. And it was a rude awakening for me when I realized, okay, I'm graduating high school now. And the entire purpose of this was so that I could get a job and then go earn money. Right. So this thing I had disdain for, all of a sudden I realized this is basically what life is about. Right. Everyone says you can't, money can't make you happy and don't pursue money and all these different things. But the reality is you have to. Right. At the end of the day, like we have to earn money. We have to pay bills. We all have mortgages. We all have car payments. We all have rent. And so we can't just, live in this fairy tale land of money doesn't matter, because that's not reality. And so I then was confronted with three potential decisions. And I'm going to share with you what those were, because it's something that I think all of us ultimately end up facing for ourselves, whether it's intentional or unintentional, right? And those three decisions were, okay, either if this money thing matters, because it's really involuntary, right? I'm gonna be dragged along kicking and screaming, or I can be fully responsible and take part in this money game, right? And so everyone here has the opportunity to either live in poverty. That's one way to exit the money thing. Say, I'm going to live in poverty. I'm just not going to participate. I made that decision. I don't recommend it. We also all have the ability to live in denial, to pretend it's not happening, to say, hey, as long as I have my weekends off, as long as I have my friends and my family, and I can go on a couple of trips a few times a year, I don't care that I have debt. I don't care that I'm one emergency away from being on the street. I don't care that I can't retire. Right? Or the third option is we build wealth, right? We literally accumulate such an affluence of this money stuff that it doesn't matter, right? I use the example of learning how to treat money like oxygen, gaining the ability to do that. Okay. Because treating money like oxygen, think about it. We don't live breath to breath like we live paycheck to paycheck, right? It's an example I use all the time, and it might sound cliche and it might get old sometimes, but reality is, what if we all treated oxygen the way we treated money today? Right? Our lives would look really different. So the reason why I teach these courses is because money is not scarce, right? It is abundant. It is really just an idea, right? There's not as much behind it as we think there is, yet there is some basics that we need to know. And if we don't know them, it makes money a harder subject than it has to be, right? So my goal here tonight is to make money simple again. Now, the topic we're going to cover is debt. We're going to talk about consumer debt, right? Now, when I say consumer debt, it doesn't mean that there's good debt and bad debt. That's actually a myth. Debt is amoral, so it doesn't have good and bad, right? It's not like a dog, right? Like the debt didn't piss on the carpet and you're like bad debt, right? It's not that at all. It's our behavior, right? And so there's consumer debt, which is the behavior of consuming. Excuse my crazy hair here. The behavior of consuming, and that's why we call it consumer debt, not because that's the type of debt it is. It's because that's the type of behavior that we utilized when we got into that debt, right? The other thing we have to understand is what debt is in the first place, right? Debt is not this mythical bad guy monster that it's out to ruin our lives. Debt means that we at one point didn't have money, and so we spent it anyways using someone else's. In business, I call it backlog. Like when you don't handle an area and then it builds up and accumulates, and now all of a sudden you have all of this old stuff you've got to go handle. Debt is backlogged money, right? I didn't produce, I didn't earn, I spent more than I had. And now I have a backlog of money that I spent that I didn't actually have the income to solve for. It's all math, right? So in order to make that equation zero, I have to add income, and that income is the solution that makes the debt zero. It goes away. Now, there's a couple of different groups that are watching tonight with debt. Some of us are watching, we don't have debt, right? We don't have any consumer debt. And consumer debt being different than investment debt, right? Again, behavior. I can invest with debt. I can consume with debt. It's not the debt's fault. It's my fault, right? So there's a group here that probably doesn't have debt. So if you're watching tonight, instead of tuning out, I want you to think about the people you know that do have debt, because I'm going to share with you something tonight that you probably didn't know about I didn't know about at first, right? And so it's something you can share with people that you know have debt, and they could win with this information with you. Now, there are also people in this group that currently do have debt, right? Whether it be a car payment, whether it be a student loan, whether it be a credit card. And so with this, the group that has debt, that's divided into different subcategories, right? And so one of those subcategories is has debt and knows it's something we need to get rid of. And that's why you might be on the webinar tonight. You're like, I have debt. I understand it. I don't want to have debt. I want to get rid of it, right? And so that's somebody that I'm going to be speaking to tonight. I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm going to show you how to do that most optimally, right? There's another group that has debt and you don't want to get rid of it because you have the mindset of it's normal, right? Everyone has a car payment. Maybe you're the interest rates are cheap person, right? It's okay for me to have a loan on my car because interest rates are cheap. And what I want to share with you without offending your personal beliefs is you've been trapped into believing that debt's okay. Okay. And I'm going to show you why it's not okay on the consumption level, right? And then finally, there's the group that has debt that just pretends like they don't, right? Some of these people that are posting about Dogecoin, I know they have $30,000 in credit card debt. They have no business posting about Dogecoin, right? But they're going to pretend like they don't because they don't want to admit it. And the reason why is debt is it's one of those dirty little things that all of us have had or currently have, yet we don't talk about. It's kind of like sex, right? And so we don't want to talk about it, yet we all know what it is. We've usually all done it, right? And we all have some part of life involved with it, yet nobody discusses it, right? The other thing is it's one of those things too, where in the entrepreneurial world, right, you're either Robert Kiyosaki or you're Dave Ramsey. And I think that's way too polarized. And what I mean by that is you're either of the school of thought, debt's bad, never have a credit score, never borrow money, even for investments. You know, you're going to go to hell if you borrow money on a credit card, yada, yada, yada. And that's the Dave Ramsey side. And so a lot of us that are entrepreneurs don't like that because it's scarcity and we don't agree with it, right? And so we then gravitate to the Robert Kiyosaki side, which is borrow money on a credit card to try and flip a house with zero money down. I think that's also way too polarized. And so it becomes this subject that nobody really wants to address because nobody can really agree with it. So I'm going to give you a statement tonight that we can all agree on before we start into this. Number one, debt means that I had to borrow money because I didn't have money of my own. So debt is not the problem. Debt is the symptom. The problem is I didn't produce. The problem is I didn't exchange with others. The problem is I didn't think ahead. And because of that, I didn't have money. And when an opportunity or an emergency came up, I had to borrow the money from someone that did have it, right? We can all agree with that. The other thing we can all agree on is debt takes up a residual amount of my income. Doesn't matter what the interest rate is. There's principal due on the loans that I have. So if I borrow money, I've got to pay it back. There's a term length that I have to pay it back over. And that term length, basically creates a payment schedule. And I have to make these payments every month until the debt's paid off. And that means that I lose out on something called opportunity cost. What could I be doing with my income if I didn't have to pay off my debt? Okay. Now, the other statement that we can all agree on that I don't think we've ever thought about, maybe some of us have, and if you're a client of mine, you definitely have, we have positive dollars here, right? And then we also have negative dollars, right? So positive dollars, this would be like assets, this would be income, right? And then we have our negative dollars, which is debt, right? So these ones they add, these ones they subtract. And so one of the things that I want to get us all to agree on is this, let's call this currency, right? Like we earn currency, we earn US dollars. So let's say that I have a credit card payment and I have my paycheck show up and I take my money, my currency that I've just earned from my paycheck, and I use it to pay off my debt, right? On the surface, it's like, that's a good idea. That's a good move. Here's the problem. This disappears and this disappears, right? The debt's gone, but also so is the currency, which means I will never see that dollar again. I will never invest that dollar. I will never get interest on that dollar because that dollar is gone forever, because debt and currency are like matter and antimatter. As soon as they connect, as soon as they touch, boom, they both disappear. Okay. This is a cycle that was created by the banks, guys. And I don't want anyone to think I'm wearing my tinfoil hat. Banks are not your friend. Okay. 2020, guess who made the most money? Banks, by design, right? There's a reason why 2020 happened. So we look at this and we say, okay, I just lost my income or my currency that I've maybe saved up or earned. I'm never going to see this again. But also the debt's gone. It's kind of like a catch-22. Two wrongs don't make a right. Right? We can all agree with that. Two wrongs don't make a right. And so how do I pay off my debt where I'm not losing out on the future value of the dollars that I earn? Okay, the other thing that I want to point out here is this debt that we've borrowed from a bank, right? We have our bank here. It's not even real money. It's not like they had value and they loaned us that value and now we owe them money that was theirs. No, no, no. Banking literally creates money out of thin air. They took digits on a screen that didn't exist. They loaned them to us and then backed it by real income and real assets. Right? So they're taking a percentage of my income every single month, literally with no skin in the game. It's not even their money. Like before 2020, the reserve ratio on deposits was 10%, meaning when you deposit money in a bank, they can loan out 90% of your dollar to other people, charge those other people interest rates like on credit cards and cars and mortgages and car loans, and pay you 0.01% on your savings account. And then when they loan your money out to grandma or Billy who lives down the street or your coworker for the mortgage, your coworker for the mortgage that's now paying the bank every month on a loan that they extended with your dollars, with your money. And if your coworker defaults on that mortgage, they take his house away, but it was never the bank's money in the first place. So part of this, like I want to get on this same page with some of these agreements because this should disgust you. Like you should look at that and say, this is fundamentally wrong and it's suppressive. Okay, and I have a rule in my life. I do not connect with suppressive entities, suppressive people, suppressive groups. Banks are suppressive. Therefore, if I'm connected with them, I have suppressive connections in my life, even if it's a credit card, even if it's a car loan, because that's not a group that helps people. It's a group that pushes people down. It squashes them and takes advantage of them, right? So how do we pay off this debt, right? Let's dive into this because this is really the meat and potatoes of the course tonight. Now, with debt, there's a couple of methods, and the two main ones that I see are, I'm going to call the first one debt dispersal, meaning I've got all these debts, and I'm going to again draw this out. And these are the wrong methods I'm going to give you first. The first one is called dispersal. And this is where I have all these different debts, and I'm going to line them up, you know, in no particular order. Maybe I'll go by interest rate. Maybe I'll go by balance size. The ones that people typically tend to target, and it's as a red herring, is they tend to target their higher interest rate cards, or they tend to target their higher balances. Let me tell you a trick about interest. Interest is an arbitrary. It's a magic trick that banks came up with in order to extend the amount of time you have to pay them. It's also used for behavior manipulation. So I'm a lender. I'm not a bank, but I do a lot of lending. And I'll tell you what I do, and I'll tell you what banks do. When I loan money on a deal, if I want that deal to be paid back quicker, I'm going to charge a higher interest rate, right? I really don't care about the interest rate. I care about the income. I'm getting the dollars on that deal every month, right? The bank, they don't report their interest rate on their profit and loss. They report how many dollars they earned, right? So why would they care about one statistic, dollars, but then they have you caring about a completely different statistic, which is interest rates? I want to be focused on the statistic that they care about. They care about dollars, therefore I should care about dollars. So when I pay off my higher interest rate cards, I'm actually playing into their game. Now, I'm not saying don't pay interest or don't pay off high interest cards, but I'm saying the dispersal method usually starts with me seeing 24%. That's a really big number. I'm going to pay that one off first. Okay, so I throw all of my money at that card and I pay it off and I pay it off. Meanwhile, I have all these other ones still also charging me interest, and I never actually make progress, right? So I shouldn't chase interest rates, right? A bank will take an interest rate and they'll say, okay, on a credit card, it's unsecured, meaning it's not backed by an asset, which means it's more risky for them to loan out. Risky, they're insured on all their loans. So risk is a relative statement, but it is theoretically more risky for them to loan out. They would like you to pay it back faster, so they charge you a higher interest rate so that you will do so. Also, interest is a mathematical factor used to extend something called amortization. Amortization is a word that refers to the length of your payment schedule and the split of how many of your dollars on a payment go to interest and how many of your dollars on a payment go to principal. By inserting a higher interest rate, Less dollars go to principal, more dollars go to interest. Thus, I've lengthened the term of the payment plan. If I'm the bank, I want more of your money for a longer period of time. Thus, I'm going to charge a higher interest rate to cause that to happen. Now, if it's a mortgage, it's secured by a home, right? And so on a home, they're going to do a lower interest rate because there's less risk there, but they're also going to fix the amortization because they don't want you to pay it off early. They want you to pay them for 30 years, even though it's a lower interest rate, right? So you have to think about these things. The other one is balances, right? Balances are a red herring as well. The balance is also made up. The bank didn't have the money in the first place. They loaned you digits on a screen. They don't care about the balance. They care about the income that they're receiving from you. So you should care about the same thing. Guys, we have to be paying attention to the same statistics the bank pays attention to. They care about dollars in versus dollars out. You need to care about the same thing. So balance and interest rate, I'm not going to say they don't mean anything, but it's the wrong stat. And if you chase the wrong stat, you get the wrong product. If you get the wrong product, you're not going to expand. And at the end of the day, the bank, they're focusing on the stats, and that's an indicator that we should be as well. Okay, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page with that. If there's any questions, drop them in the comments. I'm going to make sure we answer those. And if you have debt and you're thinking with this tonight and you're like, okay, how do I apply this? Right? That's the entire goal of this course is I want you to leave tonight, and whether you hire my firm to help you or whether you do this on your own, I want you to know how to apply this. So if you feel like I heard Jerry say things and they sound smart and I don't know how to apply it, that's not the goal, right? So ask questions. All right, so how do we pay these things off? This is what we used to do. And this is still to a degree what we do, right? So we have two sides to this. We would tell people, and we still do tell people this, line your debts up, smallest balance to largest balance. We don't care about the interest rates. We don't care about any. We care about balance size. The reason why is when I pay off a smaller balance card, I no longer have to make a payment on it. I've freed up income, right? So if we're focusing on the same stats that the bank focuses on, that stat is income. And so by paying off my smaller balance cards first, I win back my income. Make sense? Now in banking, the other thing you've got to have a paradigm shift on is, again, for me, it's, let's say I borrowed the money and I'm a consumer. For me, it's debt then. I'm like, man, this is debt. It's a payment, right? And it's something I got to get rid of. And it's a chain around my ankle and it suppresses me or whatever, all this stuff that I have as a consumer that's going on. The bank doesn't think about it that way at all. For them, it's an investment, right? So think about this. If I enter the arena with a bank, let's pretend this is the Coliseum and we're doing gladiator fights and it's me versus the bank, right? And they have spears and they have knives and swords and they got balls and chains and all this stuff. And they're ready to battle. And they're viewing this fight with me as like full out, I'm going to kill Jerry. Right. And then I enter the arena and I'm thinking, poor me, I'm afraid. What am I going to do? These banks are after me. They're going to kill me. Guess what's probably going to happen? They're probably going to kill me. Right. And then they're going to feed me to lions at the end. Right. So if I'm going to enter the battle arena with the bank, I have to be viewing this the same way they do. I need to have all the same weapons they have. I need to have the same mindsets they have. I need to know what their strategies are and use the same types of strategies. A bank doesn't look at your debt as this problem. They look at it as an investment, and they actually will sell your debt to other banks as an investment. Banks will trade debts around. So when I'm paying off debt, I need to actually realize that I'm making an investment. I am buying my debt back from the bank. That hits differently, doesn't it? I'm not paying off debt. I'm not doing Dave Ramsey. I'm not digging myself out of the hole. I'm not, poor me. How am I going to? No, I'm investing right now. I'm dealing with probably a Fortune 100 financial institution who views this balance as an investment, and I am buying the balance back from them. That makes me an investor. If I don't go into it thinking as an investor, guess what? I'm going to get ripped off. The number one rule of investing is don't invest in something you don't understand. If I don't even understand what debt is to the bank when I pay it off and buy it back from them, because that's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm paying them a principal amount, just like I would on an investment. I'm freeing up income, which is paying me a yield just like an investment would. And then I'm saving on interest, thereby earning interest by not paying the interest, right? Like the dollars that I would have had to pay had I kept that debt, I don't have to pay them anymore. That's an internal rate of return, just like an investment. I am investing when I pay off debt, right? So I have to have that mindset that I'm an investor and I'm buying the debt back, and I'm going to buy smallest balance to largest balance. When I buy it back, I'm going to get the income back. I'm going to get the interest back. Now, this goes back, though, to what we said at the very beginning. Do you remember when I said currency and debt are like matter and antimatter? So if I take my dollars and I give them to the bank to get this debt bought back so that I don't have to pay them anymore, that's a positive one. I just won 1 point, right? But like we said earlier, this dollar is gone now. I'll never see it again. So the bank now has a point, right? But I lost a point. +1 - 1 = 0. I have really no net gain here because I'm never going to see the dollars again. Now I do get the income back. That's a plus, but the dollar is gone that I just spent on the debt. Future value is gone. So the problem that we solve with this is we actually took life insurance. Now, I used to be a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider. So anyone that's watching and you're like, oh, life insurance, Dave Ramsey said that sucks, or Sue Orman said that sucks, or my pastor said not to do that. The banks that you're dealing with, 80% of the banks in the United States, I think it's $189 billion worth of bank capital is held in life insurance. Okay, the average bank keeps about 20% of their reserves in a life insurance policy. They consider it tier 1 asset. Tier 1 asset means that it is the safest, most liquid and prized reserve or asset class they could hold, right? So in this category, there's life insurance, US Treasuries. Banks also consider those a tier 1 asset. I don't think they will for much longer. And then gold, right? So when you look at the bank's balance sheet, you'll see that they have billions of dollars in life insurance. So we're going to use one of their tools. Like we said, if we're in the Coliseum and we're fighting, one of the things they're using is life insurance. I want to learn about that. I want to understand that. So here's how this works. We line up all these debts, smallest balance to largest balance, and we only pay the minimums on them. Minimums only, right? And any extra cash we have, we put it inside the life insurance. All extra dollars go here. Okay, now here's how this works. Life insurance, it has a cash value, meaning we can actually save money into it. It works like a savings account. It's guaranteed against loss. It's guaranteed to grow. If I put in $100 going in, this $100 is going to grow at a positive 3 to 5% annual rate. It's tax-free. Ironically, it's also protected from creditors, meaning if I defaulted, the banks could not come after this money. They could come after my savings account with them because it's in their bank, and they'd be like, hey, you didn't pay your credit card. We're going to take away your money in our bank account now. But they can't touch my life insurance. It's also protected from lawsuits. Right? And so this is basically protecting my money and then growing my money. Now, in the banking world, there's something, it's a term called collateralization. Collateralization, it's a really big, long word. All it means is I'm going to borrow against an existing asset. So if I have this life insurance, I have my $100 growing at 3 to 5%. I'm allowed to borrow 70 to 90% of this. This is called a loan to value ratio. So the loan that I can take against the value that I own $100. That means that I can take a loan of 70 to 90% of my $100. Okay. So I'm going to be able to borrow 70 to 90 bucks off this 100. This is going to cost me 1 to 3% in interest to borrow, but I still simultaneously make the 3 to 5%. Okay. This is where some people get lost. Put in $100. $100 grows at 3 to 5%. So I'm making $3 to $5 here. This is surplus. Now I'm borrowing $70 to $90 and paying 1 to 3%. So what is 1% of $90? That's going to be 90 cents. Right? So I'm going to pay anywhere from 90 cents to, I think, 270 in interest. Meaning it costs me less to borrow than I'm earning, right? So this solves the problem of we borrowed against the account or we paid off the debt and then our currency is now obliterated and we're never going to see it again. No. All of our currency is here still growing. Meaning we take this money, we go pay off this debt. This is gone, but we did not lose our dollar. Our dollar is still there growing. And now we've also freed up some income. So we pay ourselves back because we're acting like a bank, right? So we pay ourselves back, we build back up, we pay off the next balance. And our dollars that we're putting in here, they're continuing to grow the entire time we do this. This is called the debt buyout. Now, this is the original game. This is what we originally started doing and working with clients on. And it works like a charm. It's so simple and it works. But I knew there was like something else and I couldn't figure out like, well, how do we accelerate this? Because like when I was looking at the way banks are operating, like they are able to manipulate their debt very easily. Okay. And the reason why is debt is all about mathematics and contracts. We're going to call this contract law, right? And so we added this enhancement. This actually, this came out of 2020. We started looking at, okay, well, people aren't working, right? They're spending money they don't have, and they're racking up debt. And so we started seeing, okay, we're going to have to be able to help people get out of debt at an even more rapid rate. And so we have this program now. It's called Assumption and Validation. And we use this in combination with the sacred account. So this is how this works. There's two legs to this. So let's say, and this is only with unsecured debt. So let's say that I have student loans. Let's say that I have credit cards. Let's say that I have lines of credit. These are all unsecured, meaning there's not collateral. If I have at least $10,000 total in these amounts, I can use this assumption program or the validation program. Now, I'm going to show you how these work. Now, here's how the assumption program works. Debt assumption, we have a law firm that we partner with. And basically, they would take, let's say I have 50 grand in total unsecured debt. They would actually co-sign with me on my 50,000. So they become a co-signer or a co-account holder on my debt. And now they also owe collectively with me the 50,000 to the bank, right? Now debt is all contract law, meaning the contract is what the terms are. Whatever, like when you get a credit card, like you have your credit card statement on the back, it's all those tiny little paragraphs that nobody ever reads. That's a contract. And whether you know it or not, you actually agreed to it. Right now, the bank can change that contract anytime. Who's ever had a credit card where suddenly your interest rate got raised and you didn't sign anything? They just changed the terms of the contract. And if you don't agree with it, then you can close on the account, you can pay them back. But if you continue spending money on that credit card, you've agreed to the contract. This is how this works, right? Now, the Consumer Protection Act says, and this before, I think in the early 1900s didn't exist. It used to be one way, meaning the banks could change the terms and they would pull stuff on consumers, but consumers couldn't do anything. Well, the Supreme Court said, no, this has to be a two-way street. You guys can't be, changing terms on contracts and then having that contract agreed to through the expense or the transaction on the credit card if the consumer can't also do the same thing back to you, right? So the law firm, what they do is they become the co-signer and then they change the terms on the contract. Right, they change the terms on the contract. They say, hey, we're no longer going to have interest, right? We're going to change it to where there's no due date on the debt. By the way, you can't send the notices and the bills to Jerry's home address anymore. If you do, that's a violation of the contract. There's no longer late fees. There's also no collection calls allowed. If you try and collect on the debt, that's also a violation of the contract. And they change the terms and they insert all of these violations and penalties. Now, here's the thing with banks. They're giant and they're also very fraudulent. right? And so a bank, if you do any research, you'll see that when banks break the law, they do it intentionally, and they actually take the fines and fees they're going to pay, and they just write it in their profit and loss statement. They say, hey, we're going to violate and break this law. It's going to cost us $2 billion. So we just need to make more than that. Right? They actually do that. So they're used to they're paying penalties and fees. That's the cost of doing business. Now they're also huge and everything is automated, right? So when you call your bank to pay your credit card, think about how hard it is to actually speak to a person, right? You get that voice message system and it's like that feedback loop of, say this, call this number, say this, and they try and route you and direct you without ever letting you talk to a human being. And then when you finally do, you're talking to some guy in India that doesn't know anything about banking. Right? So what happens is they change the terms of the contract and then they mail it with the first payment, right? Because they're now co-signers on your debt. They've changed the terms. They send in a check with the new contract, right? Nobody in the bank actually looks at this new contract. They just say, oh, there's a check, let's cash it. They don't think, oh, we should read this. Like it goes through an automated computer system and everything is electronically and automatically done. It would cost them billions of dollars to hire staff to do this or to change that system even. So when they cash the check, they're actually agreeing to the new terms. Same thing that happens with you. By you swiping your credit card again, you're agreeing to the higher interest rate. When they cash your check, they're agreeing to the new terms. Okay. Now, every time they break one of these new terms, it's a violation and there's a penalty. And so this law firm that we work with, they just wait. They say, hey, Jerry, don't pay on it anymore. Just let them violate the contract. And what ends up happening is I owe the bank $50,000, but after enough violations, they now owe me $50,000, right? $50,000 in penalties. This is called a wash, right? Now, it doesn't mean I have no debt. The law firm that's doing this, the reason they'll do this is because I'm going to pay them 45% of what I used to owe, right? So if I owed 50, I'm going to instead pay them 50,000, 45%. I'm going to pay them 22,500 at 0%. And I can do this over 24, 48 months. Right now, meanwhile, I don't owe the bank anything anymore. And so they're actually going to go to bat to me. Not 5% of the time, the bank might try and sue. They'll represent me in court if that happens. 95% of the time, the bank says, screw it. It's 50 grand. It's not worth it. We can write it off on our taxes anyways. And also we had insurance, so we make money even if the guy doesn't pay. It's just the cost of doing business. It'd be more expensive for us to try and fix our automated systems or hire staff to prevent this from happening. This is called debt assumption. Right now, what happens is on the sacred account debt buyout, now I've only got to pay off $22,500. I don't have to pay off 50 grand anymore. I'm paying off 45%. The other thing that happens is on 50,000, it's very common that the minimum payment on a credit card is typically about 4%, right? 3 to 4%. Let's say 3 even to be on the fair side, which means that on 50 grand, I was paying the bank $1,500 a month minimum. It could have been more depending on my interest rate, right? But if I now owe my law firm $22,500 and I'm doing a 48-month payment plan, my payment with this program is $468.75 at 0%. So I've cut my balance by 45%. I've cut my payment by almost a third of what it used to be. Right? 500 times 3. So I've cut it down to less than a third of what it used to be. My interest is now fixed at 0% and there's no early payback penalty. So my number one goal in life is to get $22,500 in my sacred account, borrow against it, pay off the law firm, and then pay myself back, and I'm done. Right? Guys, this is like a real program. This is not fairy tales and what ifs. Like this is actually something we are doing for clients. Right? So think about that. If I have 50,000 in debt or 100,000 in debt. This is not bankruptcy. This is not debt settlement. This is not a consolidation loan. This is not a 0% balance transfer. This is us using contract law against the bank. It's the same contract law they use against us. We just are going to hire a law firm that understands it. They're getting compensated very well to do this. And we're actually winning by paying less money. And the bank, basically, they're going to write it off on their taxes anyways. Now, the thing is that the bank is agreeing to this. As soon as they cash the check, like I said, they're agreeing to the change of terms. So it's not like we're robbing them or we're doing something unethical. They're agreeing to it. This has happened to them. I can tell you time after time after. There's a company that makes money by doing this as a business. They've been around for 15 or 20 years doing it. It's not like the bank doesn't. No, they're just like, like it's 50 grand. Like we'll write it off. We'll get insured. Now, the other one that's called debt validation. Okay, this one is a little bit different. Debt validation goes like this. So similarly, we're going to hire a law firm, right? And with debt, it has to be documented and compliant, right? So if I owe, let's say again, at $50,000, on paper, I know I owe it. I send the bank a payment every month, but legally, they are required to keep certain documentation for compliance reasons, federally and on state regulation as well, that says, all of the particulars, the terms, all of the right, the right T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, boxes are checked. It has to be compliant. This is the key. Compliant records. Okay. 95% of the time they're not. And so with validation, we hire a law firm, and the law firm goes through and they dispute every single debt. They dispute the actual debt balances. So they're going to send attorneys after the banks, and the attorneys are going to say, hey, we're calling bullshit. You say our client owes you $20,000 on this credit card. We would like you to prove it to us. Okay. Would you believe 95% of the time they can't? The reason why is, again, it's all automated, and they're hiring people in freaking India that don't know about banking. And so they don't have any of their compliance and record keeping correct. These are big, very, I would say like very weighty. They're not flexible. Like these organizations are huge. And so they can't do something like my business could, because we could tell Arian, like, hey, Arian, change the terms and conditions on all of our contracts. Boom. She's able to do it. Right. But if it's hundreds of thousands of employees, probably most of them don't work in the country. You've got people all over the world that are clients of yours, dozens and dozens and dozens of products and services. You're not keeping up on your records, right? There's a reason why banks pay so much in penalties and fees. So we're disputing the debt balances, and we're saying, hey, we need you to send us every single record. And if it's not compliant, the bank is not allowed to keep the debt on their books. They have to forfeit the balance, right? And so we're actually going through and disputing it. And anytime they can't show us their records and the proof the way that the state and federal laws require, they are going to forfeit the debt balance. Okay, we have about a 95% success rate with our law firm that does this. So again, same math, and they do the same agreement. They're going to charge 45% as their fee. So again, I'm going to pay them $22,500. I'm going to do that at 0% interest. And I'm going to do that over a 24 to 48 month term. Right. And I think, again, we said our payment on this was $468.75. Right. And back here, like we said, the payment here was probably $1,500 a month at an average interest rate. I think the national average is about 18%. So again, this is another way to go about this. Now, this is a little bit less aggressive. The other one with the law firm, we're literally taking our middle finger and we're not just showing it to them. We're shoving it up their butt and saying, hey, you can't do anything about this because we changed the terms of the contract. This one is a little bit more, I would say, quaint, like, hey, show us your paperwork. This isn't compliant. You need to write it off. And then they agree, okay, yeah, this is illegal because we don't have the right documents. So this is another route to go about it. But the fact is this is, again, how banks work. They use contract law, right? On your mortgage, there's contract law in there that says if the house goes below a certain loan to value, you've got to pay them off. You don't know about it, but it's in the contract. They think about this stuff when they put these contracts together. We as consumers have the same rights. We just don't have the same knowledge and ability. And so what we're doing is we're finding teams that can actually help. They know banking law. They know what the rules and regulations are, and they can give us the knowledge and ability for us to then have the same power as the banks do. But again, this is not bankruptcy. This is not debt settlement. This is not, a 0%, credit card transfer, right? And this is also not a silver bullet. I've still got to pay $22,500 over 48 months, right? And here's the thing is, if I don't pay that, the law firm is going to say fine, and they're going to drop me. And then the banks are going to be all over me because, that's what they're going to do. I don't have a law firm protecting me anymore. Right. So this is something for someone that they understand I'm going to get out of consumer debt once and for all. Now, the prerequisite to this is number one, I have to stop borrowing. Right. The number one way to get out of debt is stop getting in debt. I can't do a program like this and then, 36 months down the road, pay it all off and then go charge up all my credit cards again, or go borrow, for another round of student loans or whatever it is that I did to get myself in the hole in the first time. So I actually have to be willing, like Nano says, to change my behavior, which means I have to admit my behavior sucked to begin with. It got me in debt. So I have to do the opposite of what I used to do. So that's prerequisite number one. Prerequisite number two is I have to be on a forced savings plan. We're not gonna take your credit card payments from $1,500 to $500 so that you can go buy a new TV, right? We're gonna say, hey, before we will enroll you in this program, you have to be on a sacred account and you have to be on a forced savings plan, and you have to agree that you're actually going to do the right things this time. We're giving you a get out of jail free card. We're not gonna help you out of jail again. This is the only time we're gonna do it for you. Right? So it has to be a behavior change thing. And then thirdly, I have to be willing to stick with it. Right? Those are really the only three things is I'm willing to change my behavior. I'm willing to be on a forced savings plan and use the sacred account and actually grow that. And then I'm willing to change my behavior. Right? And if I'm willing to do all that stuff and I do all of that, that's going to be the make or break that actually gets me through a program like this successfully. Now, here's the catch. Okay, here's the catch. There's always a catch. There's always a trade-off. When I do this, the banks are going to ruin my credit, right? They're going to report lates. They're going to report charge-offs. They're going to report delinquencies. And a lot of times they're going to do it out of spite because they're upset that we beat them at their own game. And so when I get done with this, on the validation program, that might be a 6 to 12 month process. And for 6 to 12 months, my credit is going to be terrible because the banks are going to use the credit against me to say, hey, Jerry didn't pay his bills. Yeah, they're not going to say Jerry hired an attorney firm and he's using legal processes and banking law against us and we lost. They're going to say he didn't pay his bill. He didn't this, he didn't that. We're going to destroy his credit. Right. So if I do this, I have to be willing to sacrifice my credit. Now, because there are some people that are so obsessed with their credit, you should have a top 1% credit score, which is an 800 or above, right? But here's the deal. If I have $50,000 in debt or even $10,000 in debt at this point, the amount of interest and income that I'm paying is the cost of good credit. Think about that. What's $50,000? What's 18% on that, right? 50,000, let's say 18%. That's $9,000 in interest per year. Is it worth $9,000 in interest to have good credit? Hell no. Okay, what about the income? $1,500 a month times 12 months is $18,000. Is it worth paying $18,000 to have good credit? No, it's not. Right? And so some people are willing to pay money to have good credit. Some people are willing to pay having bad credit to have more money. Right? So this person is willing to sacrifice $27,000 a year to have good credit versus this person is willing to sacrifice having good credit to have $27,000 a year back in their life. Think about which one you would rather have. No, the good news is once you're done with this cycle, we send you through credit repair. We fix your credit up. We take off the negatives. We add more goods. We dispute this stuff. We get it taken up and cleaned up. And so within a year or two, you're going to have good credit again. Right now, the only reason you have credit is to borrow money for consumer spending. So really, you don't need credit when you're going through this process. We learned our lesson on borrowing money. We don't have to buy things we don't need. So really, like when we get through this, we're not trying to go borrow again. Right? If we ever borrow money again, it's because we're investing. We're not buying, fancy crap or vacations or, charging up our credit. We're done with that lifestyle. And so the credit repair is going to restore our credit, sure. But again, it goes back to what Nano said about behavior change. I'm not going to give you good credit just so you can go do the same things that got you in debt in the first place. So that's the trade-off, right? I have to be willing to sacrifice having, a pristine credit score for 12, 18, 24 months, however long it takes to get through the program. But I'm going to be getting financially compensated to have a bad credit score. If I walked up to you and I was like, hey, I'm going to pay you $18,000 to have a bad credit score for the next 2 years. Are you in? Most of you would be like, yeah, I'll figure out the credit thing. I want 18 grand. Right. And so that's the mindset shift. Credit score, again, is another arbitrary. Banks made that up as almost like a social shaming, right? Like the Fair Isaac Corporation, FICO, that's not a bureau. The credit bureaus are not bureaus. They're all private corporations and they're all in cahoots with the banks. So they created like a social scoring program to make you shamed for, borrowing from them and not paying them back. So that way you get, discriminated against later on in life by other institutions that are a part of the same ring. We shouldn't be trying to oppress these people. We should be trying to get them out of our lives. So guys, this is the 2.0 on the debt buyout. And so the main difference here is instead of lining debts up smallest balance to largest, we're enrolling all of them into the program. Okay, as long as they qualify, we cannot do secured loans. So we can't do your car, we can't do your house, unfortunately, right? Those are all secured by assets, but we can do credit cards, we can do lines of credit, we can do private student loans, right? If you have a federal loan, all we've got to do is refi it to private and then we can enroll it in the program and it qualifies as unsecured. We can do lines of credit. If you've defaulted on your car and you just owe now a charge off on the car balance and they repoed it already, that's also unsecured. You can enroll that. We can do taxes. There's so many things we can roll into a program like this, right? And so we'd enroll everything in here first. We get the balance cut down by 45%. Then we build up the sacred account. Then we pay off all the debt, and we're out of debt usually on a program like this for the average person in 12 to 24 months. Okay, versus what is it going to be otherwise? 8, 10, 15, 20 years. Okay, real success story. We have from a client that just enrolled in this. She's in the program now. She enrolled about 50,000 in debt. And so she was going to be out of debt in 8 years. She's now going to be out of debt in less than 24 months. And between principal and interest, we're saving her about $70,000 in principal and interest, not even including what she's going to get on growth on the sacred account by having her $1,500 a month payments cut down to $500 a month. That 1,000 difference she's putting in her sacred account now. So it's going to grow over time and she's saving all that interest. So guys, this is what I wanted to cover tonight. I know that there was a lot here, a lot of information. I know this was also probably brand new for a lot of people here. So I want to have just a couple of minutes open for questions. So if you have questions and you've been watching this, go ahead and drop them in the comments on Zoom. If you're on Facebook, you can drop them here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and change over my microphone just to make sure there's no feedback. All right, so you guys should be able to hear me now on the headset. All right, let me know if you guys can hear me okay. Except for the headphones aren't working. Nano says you guys can hear me a little bit. All right, Mark says audio is good. There's a bit of an echo. Let me get rid of that echo for you guys. Okay, that should be good. Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump into some questions here. We have some on Facebook. Andy, good to see you here. Brad, good to see you. Brad is someone that has no consumer debt. So Brad, if you know people that have consumer debt, you can share this with them as an ambassador. And this is something you can help them out with. Eric says just freed up another $1,100 a month by getting rid of consumer debt. Only big totals left. That's awesome. Eric, we should talk about maybe a program like this and see if it makes sense for you. Good to see you, Todd. Eric says, does this contract agreement change with banks also work with credit unions? Yes, so it works with any debt that's unsecured, as long as it's private, meaning it can be a credit union, it can be a bank. The only one we won't mess with is the Fed, right? So if it's a federal student loan, we're not about to do this to the government because at the end of the day, they'll put you in a cage and stick a gun to your head, even if you beat them, fair and square by the rules. It's like dealing with the mafia. So we won't do this with federal, but again, if you have federal student loans, we can refinance them to private and do it then. All right, lots of questions on Zoom here tonight. Let me go ahead and see what we have going on Zoom. All right, just one says amazing data, not only to get or not only to get out of debt, but to stay out of debt. Totally agree. Okay, Frank has a question. Let me go ahead and bring Frank on live here. All right, so we're live here with Frank. How are you tonight, Frank?
I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. What is your question tonight?
I was just wondering, so I have about 2.5 months left to pay off credit card debt. It's already at 0%. Is it really worth it to go through the program?
Good question. So if you have 2 months left, I would say not. It depends on your balance, right? So, from a qualification standpoint, if you've got less than 10 grand in debt, then it doesn't really make sense to do it anyways. And then also if you can get out in 2 months, then it doesn't make total sense to enroll in a program like this because you'll be out so fast. Now, if you have other debt like student loans and lines of credit and there's other things after the credit cards, then it's something that could definitely be worth doing at that point. But if it's just, 5 or 7 grand on a credit card and you're going to knock that out in a few months, I think you're okay to just continue and proceed that way. All right. We have a couple of questions here. We have one from Mark. Mark's is a little bit long. So let me read his first. He says, I have 2 HELOCs that I use for investment opportunities. I have an introductory rate of 2.75% until December of 21. The bank is offering a fixed rate option of 3.05% for 25 years. Total balance of both HELOCs is approximately $355K. I make monthly payments of about $2,000 a month each HELOC. My question is a fixed rate option a good deal for me, or should I continue with my current situation with the monthly payment on the HELOCs? I'm concerned about interest rates going up in the future. Good question. So let me bring Mark on live here just so we can chat. I have a couple questions for him to clarify on this. All right, we're live with Mark. How are you tonight, Mark?
Hey, I'm good, Jerry. Thanks for answering and hitting on my question.
Absolutely. So I wanted to clarify on your variable rate, what is the index that it's tied to? Is that tied to LIBOR or Prime?
Prime.
Prime. Okay. So if it's variable on Prime, it may go up a little bit. And this is just my own opinion, but I don't think it's going to go up a lot. I don't think we're in a position or an environment where interest rates can go very much higher without them sending us into some sort of deflationary economic environment where people stop spending because money gets expensive. The other thing with a HELOC is your effective rate is very different than your gross rate. So they might be charging you, 2.75% gross. And maybe they bump it up to 3 or even 4, right? I've seen HELOCs that are 4%. But if you're paying back that HELOC every month, you're paying down the principal. Therefore, your dollars paid in interest are also lower. So if you took your effective rate, which is the actual dollars in interest paid, amortized throughout the year, and then also factored in probably tax deductions that you're taking on that interest since it's investment debt, I would venture to guess that your cost of money is probably less than 1%. So you could go either way on that. It's probably not going to kill you if you go fixed. On variable, I'm a little more risky and aggressive, and so I'm okay with a variable rate. Some people are maybe more conservative and they'd want a fixed rate just to have that peace of mind, but I think you probably are going to be okay, and I don't think they'll raise the rates that much. Somebody wants to know, where are you borrowing money for less than 3%? I have to ask Mark about that. Andrew asks, when or will we get links to this? I want to send this to a friend. So Andrew, reach out to Nano Aquino. Nano can reach out and connect with your friend. Because of the nature of the relationship that the legal firm has with the banks, we do not publicly advertise because we don't want the banks to know and go after the law firms or try and, lobby Congress to change the rules. So it's a very much referral basis thing that we're doing. And so if you have friends, if you have family that you think this could help, connect them with myself, connect them with Nano, connect them with somebody on our team. And we will be able to get a direct connection with the law firms to go through a program like this. All right, AJ has a question. Let me go and bring AJ on live here. Hey, AJ, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, Jerry. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. So what is your question?
So this was great information. My question was really, you mentioned kind of the threshold in coming in. Is there a maximum in terms of the amount that you owe, for example, on student loans, and if it's always 45% in terms of the deal on the assumption scenario that you laid out?
Yeah, good question. So on amounts, the student loan is probably the exception. On credit cards, there is a per balance limit, right? And so that per balance limit is typically 40 to 50,000. So if you've got more than 40 or 50,000 on a single card, then we usually want to break that up or just not enroll that one until we bring it down lower. And the reason being is if you get over the 40 to 50 grand line on a single line with a bank, and then you pull something like this, they will sue you. Like that's a big enough number where they're going to sue us. And again, we do have a law firm and we can make sure that you're represented and everything at no extra cost. It's all with the program, but nobody wants to get sued. And so if it's over 45,000 on an unsecured line, then we want to break that up. The only exception is typically student loans. We have seen student loans that are higher than that we've been able to enroll. There are also strategies to break those down a little bit and move them into separate loans as well if we want to try and spread them out. But that's something when you actually enroll, you go through a consultation and you actually go and talk with our team to find out if this is even a smart idea for you. And so part of that phone call is, okay, what are your balances? If we were to enroll in the program, how would we attack each one? And so they'll honestly tell us, hey, this one's too big, because they don't want to go through the hassle of having to deal with the legal end of a bank, because the bank does have a lot of money. And if they want to, they can tie a firm up for quite a long time, in a legal battle, even if the firm is using contract law. All right, here we have a couple questions. Wow, we have one from Sean King. Sean says, I am now debt free because of that. That is freaking awesome, Sean. Sean's a client of ours in Alaska. I think he might be still in Florida, or maybe not. But Sean was basically in debt, paid off all of his debt using the Sacred account. And I think it's been less than 2 years. That's amazing. So great job, Sean. Love success stories like that. All right, let's see if there is anything else here on Zoom. All right, I think we answered everything. So guys, if you're watching this and you're a client already and you're like, hey, I have consumer debt, I'd like to get out, reach out to myself, reach out to Nano. We'd love to answer your questions on the program. We can do a free call with our debt resolution team and just see if it makes sense, right? This is not for everybody. And so that's a conversation where we're not trying to close you, quote unquote, on doing this. It's, does this make sense? And if it does, here's the risks, here's the numbers. If it doesn't make sense, we're going to come right out and tell you as soon as we can, this is not a smart idea. Now, if you're not a client yet, then I want to offer you a copy of my book. Okay. If you read this, you're able to start on it. Mark said he ordered the book last week. You're able to start on the blueprint of financial freedom. That's going to give you step-by-step, how do I handle my debt? How do I handle my budget on the solvency side? How do I build up saving? How do I reduce taxes? How do I start investing? This is what I wrote up by studying the top 1%. I followed it myself. The result in 6 months, I'll be financially free, passive income exceeding my savings, expenses, and taxes. Not even 30 years old yet. And so I'm a testament that the steps in this book work. So if you're not a client yet, grab a copy of this. Go to jerryfetta.com/B2F. It's the letter B, the number 2, the letter F. If you're interested in the debt program and you're not a client yet, reach out to Nano. You can also go to our website and submit on our text field. Just shoot us a text message and ask, hey, can I get some information on the debt program? Again, there's no cost involved with the consultation. We'll walk you through the steps. We'll answer your questions. If it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, great. At least we check it out and at least we see if it's an option. So guys, I think that is all of the questions we have here tonight. Thank you all for watching. Make sure that you like, you share, you subscribe. We'll be back again next week once again. So we're going to tune out for tonight and I'll see you all next week.